एजुकेशन इज द मेन ड्राइवर ऑफ इकोनॉमिक ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन ऑफ उत्तर प्रदेश। हमारा अगला ये सेशन है, मॉडरेट करने के लिए मैं आमंत्रित करता हूँ हमारे इंडिया टुडे के एडिटर रिसर्च अजीत झा जी को। अजीत प्लीज़ आप आइए। और जो हमारे एमिनेंट स्पीकर्स हैं यहाँ पर, श्री अरविंद मोहन जी, प्रोफेसर ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स, लखनऊ यूनिवर्सिटी। बहुत धन्यवाद सर, स्वागत है आपका, तालियों से स्वागत कीजिए। श्री पंकज अग्रवाल जी, चांसलर, राम स्वरूप यूनिवर्सिटी, आईआईटी कानपुर। बहुत धन्यवाद पंकज जी। श्री मसीम अली साहब, सेक्रेटरी, अमेरिकन यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ बार्बाडोस एंड एरा मेडिकल कॉलेज, लखनऊ। बहुत धन्यवाद। Over to you, Ajit. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a formidable task. We had a brilliant speech from Minister Raj Chengappa, told you the basis of the state of the state. So what I'll do is, I was supposed to do a longish presentation on the state of the state. I'll just make it brief to some few introductory remarks, and then I'll get back straight away to the session. You know by now that the whole idea of the state of the state was basically to understand the state of the districts in Uttar Pradesh. We have about 75 districts in Uttar Pradesh. We ended up actually only studying 71 of those because 4 of those were recently created. We didn't have the data. So we went by 10 categories. Each of the category, education, health, industry, services, agriculture, there's a long list of them. I mean, as I said, 10 of them. Each of the category is a composite index of certain parameters. And those, like for example, if you're doing education, then in education, because we are starting the session on education, the parameters were, for example, the number of students attending schools, for example, male, female, their ratio, and then literacy levels, etc., etc. I could give you the details of each of them. Whatever data was available, we tried to look at it. We looked at it for the last 10 years, and then came up with a measure which tells us how the districts are performing. Let me quickly get to the results of that survey. One of the questions was related to that. One of the big issues was this inequality between the various regions in Uttar Pradesh. Number one, Western region, almost double that of other regions, especially the East, in terms of per capita income, in terms of the growth rate, in terms of other indices. Now that was pretty shocking. When the minister was questioned, he kind of referred it back to US and UK and said, well, there are regional inequalities in other parts of the world as well. Let me tell you, it's actually a little worse in Uttar Pradesh. In fact, the truth is that the inequality between the eastern and western regions in Uttar Pradesh is actually worse than when Andhra Pradesh was bifurcated between Andhra and Telangana. So the simple recommendation for the next administration in 2017 would be that once you come to power, regardless of whichever political party comes to power, you must start on a war footing the development of East UP, of Bundelkhand, and the Awadh region. You really, really need to pay attention to agriculture and industry. Uttar Pradesh is a very interesting paradox. Politically, 9 out of 14 prime ministers from Uttar Pradesh, 80 Lok Sabha seats from Uttar Pradesh, several cabinet rank ministers from Uttar Pradesh. UP almost has controlled Delhi in the past. So politically, UP is dominant. Culturally, all the three sort of holy trinity of Hinduism, Shiva's abode, Varanasi, Krishna's birthplace, Mathura, Ram's birthplace, Ayodhya. So culturally, if you look at it, look at Islam, for example, Aligarh, Deoband, Bareilly, all three great legal and intellectual traditions of Islam in India comes from Uttar Pradesh. Buddhism, Kushinagar, Sarnath, dominated in a way almost like Bodh Gaya and Bihar. So politically, culturally, UP dominates the rest of the country, dominates Delhi. But economically, it doesn't. It's an economic laggard. It's part of what we call the Bimaru states. Now, that is the big puzzle at the heart of this study, number one. Number two, the inequality between the East and the West, the inequality between Western Uttar Pradesh and Bundelkhand, Awadh, and the eastern regions. That's the second. The other interesting thing is from 2003, 2004, Uttar Pradesh actually developed rather rapidly. In fact, the growth rate more than doubled in that period. And that is an issue we will come to when we start the discussion here. Why did that happen? That is a very important subject. In fact, we were discussing with one of the panelists why this sudden transformation in the year 2003, 2004. But yet, when we see that transformation, we find that the services sector growth is much higher, but agriculture has not done as well. Industry hasn't done as well compared to some of the other states. So that's the third important sort of findings of the survey. I could go on and on. Let me just point out one positive development since this 2003 period, and that is when we looked at the levels of development, most of the districts, you will see in the evening when we tell you the names of the districts, most of the districts which did well actually fall in Western UP. They don't fall in the so-called other regions. In fact, almost 7 out of 10 fall in Western UP. So then, most of you who know Uttar Pradesh better than me, you would come around and ask me, what are you telling me new? All of us know that Western UP is much more developed. Ghaziabad, Noida left, Gautam Budh Nagar, they're much more developed than, let's say, Devariya or Mao or some Eastern UP district. But what we found interesting, when we actually changed a certain way of measuring, we said, okay, let's look at the districts that have done very well from their base 10 years ago. Then we found that the number of districts which has improved rapidly actually turned out to be from the so-called non-developed region, from Eastern UP, from Bundelkhand, from Awadh region. Now, in economics, most people know that when your base is very low, you grow much more rapidly than compared to, let's say, those which are much more developed. I mean, we find growth rates in the West almost stagnant, whereas growth rates in emerging economies like India and China, 7%, 8%, sometimes even double digits. It could be a part of that, but it's also to some extent, if you look at, for example, law and order, which is not exactly an economic variable, we find sort of, great development in education. In other areas, we find great development in districts which actually come from quote unquote, economically backward regions. So let me stop there in terms of the overall presentation because we've run out of time. And let me go straight to our panelists. Let me start with Professor Arvind Mohan because he's also sitting to extreme corner on the, from me. And the other reason is because Professor Arvind Mohan and I had a great discussion while we were doing this survey on the state of economy. And let me start with the first question. In 2003, 2004, it seems, there was an economic transformation taking place in Uttar Pradesh. And for me, it's very interesting because that was the time I had come to Lucknow, stayed here for 6 months, and was doing, I had started a newspaper here, whatever. So at that time, I was looking at UP very carefully. And we find that that was the period when UP was, in a way, transforming. Now, let me ask this question to Professor Arvind Mohan. If you could tell us briefly, why do you think that was a crucial period for Uttar Pradesh? And why is it that that has had such a big effect today? Professor Arvind Mohan.
Thank you, Mr. Jha. I'm extremely thankful for this invite to be part of the panel. And coming straight to your question, my take is, if you're looking at Uttar Pradesh, UP truly today is an idea whose time has come. And why I'm saying this, that why UP is an idea whose time has come, before I actually answer your question. One, when you are looking at Uttar Pradesh, look at the 90s. Growth rate of Uttar Pradesh on an average is around 4%. And from 4%, forget 2003 because I see it as a blur in 2003. But as you move forward, look at last 5 years odd, then you realize that Uttar Pradesh has been recording a growth rate today of more than 7% today, which is higher than the national average. Now, a state which was recording less than 4% growth today for more than 5 years now, almost 5 years now, is recording a growth rate of 7% plus. This is a transformation extraordinary. Now, why did it happen? Most importantly, look at the reforms of 1991, the great Indian reforms. Look at the content of those reforms. Those reforms, the content of reforms are such that they do not favor a state like Uttar Pradesh. Rather, they kind of bypass a state like Uttar Pradesh because those were, I'll recall a speech of Manmohan Singh as Finance Minister of India in the Parliament. And he mentioned that we cannot do everything together. So what we are doing is we are phasing it out. So first generation reform, which are industry centric and urban in nature, are being initiated. So those reforms did wonders for India, but they helped those states which had large industry, those states which had an international connect, which were close to the seaports, etc. All these things were not there in Uttar Pradesh. And as we are moving towards the second generation reform, which are truly yet to begin, but gradually that process is beginning to take shape, things begin to change in Uttar Pradesh. As we are moving into second generation reform, which is part of the subject of this panel also, I always say that Uttar Pradesh, and for that matter India, is a 3-engine aircraft. The first engine is the industry, second engine is human development, that is health and education, and the third development is rural development, which will also include a smaller scale and rural industry. These two engines we haven't truly opened.
Is it possible that political stability, which we see kind of from the period 2003 onwards, for example, the Samajwadi Party government led by Mulayam Singh Yadav was there for almost literally 3.5 years, from 2003 onwards to 2007. Then you had two back-to-back, full-term, 5-year governments. Could that have been a reason spurring the economic development of this period?
See, it certainly has helped, but the most, in so many ways it has helped. But the most important change that you are witnessing starting 97-98 is the fiscal transformation of Uttar Pradesh. In 97-98, when a white paper on state finances were released, which truly revealed the nature of crisis in Uttar Pradesh, it suggested that this state did not have enough tax resources of its own to pay salaries of its employees. Out of the total budget, only around 94%, close to that, was revenue expenditure. Development or capital expenditure was less than 6%, meaning states' hands were tied, they couldn't spend. The world has changed today. Today, Uttar Pradesh, even in the worst of times, even when the global meltdown happened, Sixth Pay Commission happened, despite those pressures, Uttar Pradesh state finances continue to improve across political combinations.
Crisis always leads to innovation.
Exactly.
You were pointing out the 97-98 budget. When did the innovation actually begin in Uttar Pradesh in terms of state finances, as you point out?
It started around 2001 when a very concerted effort begins. And after that, as you mentioned, we had a BJP government, we had a Mayawati government, we had Mulayam Singh government, and then Akhilesh government. Across political combinations, this is one transformation, one political change, which every government tried to do better than the earlier one. And the result is, today, if you're looking at the 12th Finance Commission, we did a study for the World Bank, and we find that using indicators of the 12th Finance Commission, out of the 6 major fiscal indicators, on 5, Uttar Pradesh stood at the bottom among the 17 major states in India. It was amongst the 5 bottom states in India. As you are moving towards 2013, 14, 15, what we are realizing is Uttar Pradesh, out of 6, on the 5 indicators, is today one of the 5 best performing states in India. Now, that is the kind of transformation.
And what are these 5 indicators that you point out?
Indicators like fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, share of taxation in GSDP, debt, etc. Those are the kind of indicators, development expenditure, social expenditure. All those indicators taken together, and look at the change it brings. Because now this state, with development expenditure nearing 19% of the total budget, which means the state today has capacity to spend on itself. And that is reflecting now. Now, for example, what Akhilesh Yadav government has been able to do is, look at Abhishek Mishra ji was referring to Lucknow-Agra Expressway, is around 13,000 crore odd expenditure. This entire expenditure is coming from a state's own resources. Not even a penny has been taken from any private sector or any international institution. Completely funded from its own budget. Look at the metro, major part of expenditure, again coming from state's own resources. So state's own capacity has completely transformed.
Very interesting. Let me sort of switch the question to our second sort of panelist, Pankaj Agarwal, Chancellor of Ramswarup University. Do you think, Professor Agarwal in this case, do you think it is possible that an educational impetus could have been the cause for this transformation taking place, let's say, in Uttar Pradesh, economically, from 2000 onwards, sharper 2003, 2004 onwards?
First of all, thank you, India Group, for calling me on this dais. Actually, you said professor. I'm not a professor, but yes, I'm an entrepreneur. And as far as UP was concerned, we graduated, me and my wife, we graduated in the year 98 from IIT Kanpur. And if you take, the same example from an institution from West, say, US, why MIT institutes like Massachusetts and these institutions are supposed to be the best? Because, people coming out from there, they don't want jobs. In fact, they're the people who get into entrepreneurship. They create jobs. And this is where, when we came out, this is where institutions like IITs stand out. Because there, what we are being taught to be the leaders. And that is the key. This is the place where, if we see in our education system as of today, is the place where we're missing a lot of things. Earlier, what we saw, that the best of human resource, the best of students, they were the ones who were joining Education League because they were the trainers. And you can understand, the quality of teachers will always decide the kind of human resource which we're producing. And the best of human resource which we are going to produce is going to get the best of jobs, going to create the best of jobs, going to create the best of opportunity. And as far as this state, my state of Uttar Pradesh is concerned, it is supposed to be the most populous state of our country. In fact, would have been the 7th largest country of the world by virtue of the numbers.
Larger than Brazil, actually.
Yes. So what this actually made us think as a land of opportunity. People. It's all about perception. It is all about perception. So more hands, more people will always lead to more of opportunities. And this is what we saw. And education, let me tell you, it is actually the foundation of everything. I mean, I'm a civil engineer, so I always talk on those lines. Foundation is the key point for anything and everything. So whatever we talk about, you talk about old age, we talk about, we go a long time back, we go to Treta Yuga and Dwapar Yuga. We see there that the education is the acharyas, the rishi munis, the researchers. They were the key people there. I mean, we've all seen through serials, or we've all read it. If you see the ruler, you see Lord Rama, you see Lord Krishna, the first person whom you find besides them is the researcher, is the rishi, who's actually the teacher. He is the one who is finding out what needs to be done to take the state, to take the region forward, about everything, about the welfare, what Professor talked about, about welfare, about health. Everything is pushed or is given an impetus through those researchers only. So I've always...
Let me intervene. You're absolutely right. I mean, after all, Uttar Pradesh is the state of Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, who started BHU, right? I mean, the greatest educational entrepreneur, exactly like you at that time. So not only that, in fact, Uttar Pradesh is the only state only state in the country which had 2 IITs, Kanpur and BHU for a long time. In fact, even Roorkee was part of Uttar Pradesh's history, and now it's a 3rd IIT, which is now in Uttarakhand. Similarly, if you look at medical colleges, some of the topmost medical colleges in the country have been in this state. But let me ask you a pointed question on education. We find, our sort of study shows, because we focus on primary education, that on primary education, the state has been largely a failure. When it comes to secondary education, when it comes to inter-colleges, when it has come to higher education, the state has done relatively better. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I would agree with whatever you're saying 100%, because the actual focus should be on primary education, because as most of the studies show, a child learns 95% of its learning during maybe till class 5. So for a very, very long time, we have not been able, someone must think, and it is time that we must think and ponder upon this, that what is the final output that is required out of this primary education up to K-12, that we're talking about. That is where we're missing, It has to be a more workshop-based. We were just studying on how countries like Finland and Austria, Why I'm talking about these countries, because whatever they create, if you see anything made in Finland or made in Austria, they're the world's best thing. I mean, they don't compromise on quality and research at any point. And if you study their education system, it is not like what we do. It is more workshop based. It is more practical in approach. You know, every student has to go to the ground and maybe climb a tree, because by doing that, that student learns, and in the process, he knows what is going around the nature. And second thing, you know, where again we falter is that we try to focus on everything. It is just not possible. We all need to find out in every child, in every student, in every human being, we need to find out the strong points of that person, and that can only be done through an analysis, through a SWOT analysis, which can be done within the classroom, and then develop that student accordingly and make him perform in his or her own field. Most of the developed institutions are doing this, and this is where they are moving way ahead of our country.
Let me take the debate further to our third panelist, Misha Maliji, who's Secretary of American University of Barbados and Era Medical College, has enormous experience, again, in what we call educational entrepreneurship in this case. Let me ask you a related question. We find, and this is, by the way, very interesting, our findings show us that in the 1960s, and in fact 1970s, Uttar Pradesh was actually a pioneer in what we call degree colleges, or rather degree colleges, inter-colleges. The number of inter-colleges that were springing up all over Uttar Pradesh in cities like Kanpur, in other cities, were enormously high. But again, as I pointed out, primary education was never taken seriously by most successive governments until even today. It is in the same state. Now, what is it? What is so peculiar about the state that you had more entrepreneurs? And by the way, most of this transformation going on in what we call the inter-colleges and so-called degree colleges were actually private entrepreneurs. The management of these colleges were in private hands. But surprisingly, that never transformed into primary school. Why would you think that was the case? Because you have a background in, what is it that in the Indian system or in the UP system, we don't focus at the Montessori level, at the primary education level, but sort of focus more towards the university level, the secondary school level, the inter-college level?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. See, I start by saying, if you're talking about a private businessman or entrepreneur, first thing is viability. So any project we start, it has to be viable. So what I feel the difference why higher education has grown more than the primary education is viability. That is a key point what I think as a businessman or an entrepreneur. Though it is you can say, a part of a social responsibility that we should have more focus on the starting of any child education. So what I feel that I can give you a small example, it's a little different what you've asked, that I know an organization in Lucknow, they are running, how can we do this? Like they are running a school where 2,500 students are studying in the morning times from say 8 to 1. After that, they have another evening classes. For that, they are, I think, same number of students they are teaching, and they are charging nothing from them. So morning time, they are taking fees from them, and the evening time, they are running free classes, giving them free uniforms, everything. So, and with same kind of teachers. So I think we have to have some kind of approach from we should not expect everything from the government. See, government cannot do everything. In this, somewhere I think entrepreneurs have to come, and the responsibility of the government is to give them facility. Suppose if somebody is doing this kind of a job, then he should be giving some rebates or some exemptions or some kind of incentives where people get motivated to do all kind of these things. The second thing I like to point out, I like to just read out from Mr. Arun Puri, one of the editorials from him. What he says, and I think you have not asked me about this, but I like to point out here.
Go ahead.
The higher education in India suffers from scarcity of both quality and quantity. According to 2010 study by National Assessment and Accreditation Council, over 90% of colleges are average or below average. So see, Now, the topic of this discussion is education as main driver of economic transformation of Uttar Pradesh.
Right.
See, what I feel about this topic is that how education in itself can be a booster in economy of this state. See, if we see overall, like India is spending around, Indians rather I say, spending around 18 to 20 billion dollars by around 3 lakh students are going out of India. And we are sending that money out of India. And see the kind of environment now we have in the world, like you see in the UK and all. See, if we start, the location of this state is such that it is in the center of India. We are very, very, if you see Noida and Ghaziabad, it is next to Delhi. Or if you see Lucknow, see, we can cover so many states from here, and rather you can say a country also, Nepal, and we are connected to Bihar, then Madhya Pradesh, and then so many other states can come through. See, if we can have some kind of a quality education and institutions which are developed, which is more, like if you see the example of America, so most of the best Ivy League institutions are all either managed by private trust or private organizations. So somewhere I feel that, but they are being given lots of incentives there.
Let me throw this question straight back to Mr. Pankaj Agarwal. Mr. Pankaj Agarwal, I mean, I think Mission Ali has hit the nail on the head. You know, if Uttar Pradesh is a place where you had almost 3 IITs, as I pointed out, which had Madan Mohan Malviya starting BHU, you know, some of the top universities in the country. Allahabad was called the Oxford of the East. Why is it today, and if you think what I'm asking is valid, why is it that the private universities started in the last 15 years or 20 years don't match the quality of the earlier universities? If you think that is a valid question.
I would say it is partly correct because you know, you can't match time. There are a few things, you know, especially for an educational institution, it always takes time to build up an institution. You're talking about BHU, it took a lot of time. You know, I mean, the way you see it today. But most of the institutions, I would say there are quite a few institutions, number of institutions, private institutions, which are doing exceptionally well today, given the kind of inputs in terms of the kind of students they get, the kind of human resource as far as teachers are concerned, which they have. Because like most of the institutions are today being run on sound processes. Like if I may give our own example, we knew that, you know, day one we were from IIT Kanpur, but I knew that we cannot create an IIT overnight. So what we decided was that let's provide an ambience, let's provide a platform to all my students who are entering our institution, so that their value addition can be maximized, and that. On that large scale, you know, an intake of 300 students, 400 students, that was only possible through sound processes. And this is exactly, most of the institutions are doing that. If you see the authorities, say state government or maybe AICT or MCI, most of these institutions, what they are providing us with sound processes, and those processes are meant to provide a certain level of value addition among the students, and this is what is being done. And in times to come, this is a normal philosophy, you know, this is the evolution which is bound to happen. And if you think that there are 100 institutions and 100 institutions will go on the same track, that is never possible. But I can tell you, in our state, I mean, we started pretty late compared to the South India education scenario in South India. But today, if you see the study of AICT and other institutions, I think UP has done exceptionally well there because of the caliber, like initially you also said that most of the prime ministers have come from this place. We have 80 seats in Lok Sabha. So people of UP have caliber, and it's just a matter of time. And given the time scenario, given the timelines that we already had, I think we've done exceptionally well. And in times to come, I'm sure we are going to surpass institutions like maybe BHU or IIT. We'll have quite a few such institutions in our state.
Professor Arvind Mohan, this paradox of education in Uttar Pradesh, where primary education has suffered, but secondary education, inter-colleges, degree colleges, universities have done much better. Do you think that the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan has addressed that question at all?
I think hugely. The reality is substantially different. Much of the focus of the national government, and to a large extent successive state governments also, has been primary education. And that is the reason in the first 40 years after independence, the kind of increment that we registered in enrollment, etc., was around 12% in 40 years. 1990s, that is the next 10 years, Uttar Pradesh achieved 14%. And this century, the achievement has been much more than the first 50 years. So Uttar Pradesh has actually continuously improved itself as far as primary education is concerned. What I'll want to bring into focus are two issues. One, most of the international agencies globally are now convinced that the 21st century will be ruled by one, the engines of change in 21st century will be one, agriculture as an industry, food processing two, textile three, and human development four. Human development particularly is now being called the 21st century is the age of knowledge. Knowledge will be one of the most important drivers of this century. And where is this knowledge created? It is created in higher education. I think India is missing out on the critical fact that we aren't investing in higher education. We are not. Look at the national budget. Look at the national budget. Look at the state budgets of all governments in India. You will find that we are not investing in higher education. And that is why, if you look at intellectual property right, registration, look at our researches, India is failing behind vis-a-vis most of the Western world. Even China is doing much better than what India is doing. Now, important truth is that unless and until you invest in our universities, whether public or private, you will not be able to ignite and sustain this most important engine of 21st century. And it is also important that whatever little we have invested in technology institutions like IITs, etc. I think this mistake has to be corrected. Because when you are talking about science, whether human sciences or technical sciences, you have to invest in universities because that is where researches happen, that is where innovations happen. We are not investing in universities. And that is why we are failing in the laboratory-related fields, we are failing behind. That is why the next revolution, that is biotechnology revolution, we will be failing behind. So the time has come that we have to invest in higher education if this knowledge engine is to be ignited. That's point number one. Point number two is, India has been able to achieve whatever it has been able to achieve is because of demographic dividend. And demographic dividend has allowed us, because of being young population, it has given us the possibility that because the dependent population is lower and the working and the earning population is higher, it generates more savings for us. But this advantage is now hitting the structural bottleneck. A structural bottleneck in the sense that this demographic dividend cannot be sustained any longer because the kind of income that is getting generated, the kind of capacities of this young population they have to be enhanced. What Abhishek Mishra was talking about, skill development, this is critical. But that linkage between this skill development, between the educational institution and the corporate is not happening. Unless that nucleus is created and ignited, I think we, despite investing, will not be able to achieve.
Very good points made. One, the fact that primary education is neglected. You are pointing out that higher education has been neglected. Let me shift the debate a little bit, starting with Mr. Misha Mali. The question is the following. Globally, all over the world, we know that a child's IQ is directly tied. In fact, the biggest determinant of a child's IQ is the mother's educational level. That if a mother is a PhD, the predictive power is that the child's IQ would be very high. Now, if that is the truth globally, we find that in Uttar Pradesh, when we look at education, women's education has been neglected to the core. I mean, the point is look across the states and UP's literacy levels, UP's educational levels achieved by the women in Uttar Pradesh is actually very, very low compared to the other states. Do you think that is one of the reasons why Uttar Pradesh has lagged behind both economically and educationally?
See, what I think, it is not only Uttar Pradesh. If you talk about the women education, it was maybe it was a little more in Uttar Pradesh. If you see Rajasthan or other states which are nearby state, or Madhya Pradesh or Bihar, the situation is same. So again, see, I come back to the point that there is non-availability of the, as you said, primary school first thing, then the secondary schools, then the degree colleges or universities. See, again, we come back to the point how we can have more and more of these, especially the primary schools, as you're saying. That is a starting point of any child's education. See, I feel that so many incentives have been given to so many industries. Why can't we have, it's not only about Uttar Pradesh, maybe a policy by Indian government, that why can't we have subsidies for people starting primary schools, for the corporates, for the normal entrepreneurs? So why can't we have some kind of subsidies on buildings and taxes and so many things? See, then if you want to boost something, then the government has to come out and give incentives. Then only we can have more and more schools or more and more secondary colleges. Universities and you can say medical colleges or engineering colleges as independent units are, I think they have grown a lot in last 10 years time. But for me, what I see that at the level of primary school, we are not growing at all because there is no incentive.
Pankaj Agarwal ji, why is it that entrepreneurs like you don't go for, let's say, girls' colleges, universities, sort of all women maybe, given the fact that patriarchally Uttar Pradesh is not as advanced as some of the other states in the country? Do you think that would transform the entire educational transformation going on within UP?
These kind of experiments have been done, like past few years, especially girls' engineering colleges, they were promoted by AICT, but somehow didn't work. But otherwise also, let me tell you.
Give us a few examples to our audience.
I'll tell you, like if I talk about our own institution, ours is a co-educational institution, lot of female candidates. I mean, if I can put in a number, it's between 30% to 40%, which is pretty good. But let's get to the root cause why females are not joining in these kind of courses, or why the parents are not investing, if I may use that word, on them, because it is still believed in a state like Uttar Pradesh, where literacy rate is pretty less, because for most of the students, the parents are the ones who are deciding what they are going to do. So there, what they think is that the boy is going to be the bread earner for the family, and this basic mindset has to change if you want this change to come in. And believe me, nowadays that kind of change has started seeping in, started coming in, and a lot of girl candidates are coming in. In fact, I have had few examples where I asked the parents, they came in and for their girl child, and the only reason why they wanted to do it was so that they can have a better matrimonial purpose. Just for that purpose, they wanted their child, their girl child, to get that kind of education. And as you rightly pointed out, it doesn't go for a waste. A lot of people ask me that if you are educated, if a girl child is an engineer and she's always a homemaker, an educated mother, it's by educating one female candidate, I think you are taking one whole family ahead of times. It's going to perform better than a family, where the female of the house, the master of the house, I would say, is not educated. So that change is happening, but still that mindset, now people have to understand that it's always better. It's a world where, most of the places nuclear families are working in. So there you have to understand that it's always better that both the head, the male and the female both work towards the family, and they both contribute towards the family. That is the best model. And once we understand that, I think we are going to go ahead with we are going to make sure, the parents are going to make sure that the girl child is also educated in the same manner, because she also has to earn for the family and take it forward.
Thank you. I was wondering, since there are a lot of students right at the back of this sort of audience, and I was wondering if there are any questions directly related to education in Uttar Pradesh, the state of schools, the state of universities, colleges. Are there any questions to any of the panelists? Please identify yourself. Yeah, right there, I see a hand right in the corner. Please identify yourself and point out who do you want the question addressed to. Could you, the mic, please.
See, I am K.L. Gupta, retired Director General Police of Uttar Pradesh. I want to have a question from Mr. Agrawal or Mr. Arvind, any of you can answer.
Sure.
You see, we have progressed so much in the quantity of education. Quantitatively, we have progressed very far. But qualitatively, is very poor. All over. Take it medical education, take engineering education. I was once discussing with the Vice Chancellor of UPTU. He said that we have got about 2 lakh vacancies, 2 lakh seats in the various engineering colleges, about say 800 engineering colleges. But I see, if you have 2 lakhs engineers coming out, UP will be heaven. Unka, no, Mr. Gupta, hardly 10 to 15% are employable. The quality of education is so poor. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the teachers. They take part-time teachers, even fourth year student teaches the first year student. All these things are there. So we have got a lot of commercialization in education, but the quality has gone down. So that needs to be addressed.
Why do you think that is so? I mean, I asked this question to Mr. Agarwal as well. Why do you think there's a sort of spurt in terms of quantity of schools, especially degree colleges and inter-colleges, maybe some private universities, but the quality of the education is like what it used to be in the past? I mean, you kind of brushed aside my question when I said in the past everything was wonderful. Look at Hyderabad. I mean, it's called the Indian school, one of the top business schools have started just recently there. In fact, in the south, quite a few of these institutions that began recently, even in Karnataka, for example, you have some of the best schools coming up in the recent years, but not in Uttar Pradesh. Why?
I think very, very valid point made by Gupta sir, and that's actually partly correct. There are 2 lakhs number of seats, and as he rightly said, there are only 15-20% of the seats are filled up. It's actually the story of chicken and the egg. As an entrepreneur, as an educationist, we always to make a quality institution Firstly, we always have to provide the best of infrastructure, which I think of minimal use, but yes, the best of teachers with the right processes have to be put in place. And once you do that, then you can not be assured, but still you can be hopeful that you'll be able to create students, you'll be able to produce number of students which are employable. And that is where, most of the people are lacking. But this 15-20% of number is the number where, these institutions are providing the best of infrastructure, the best of teachers, and the students are coming out of these institutions are actually performing, and they're doing pretty well. If you see the data of companies like TCS in North India, if you ask them, and they will tell you that the maximum number of people that they're hiring is from the state of Uttar Pradesh. But yes, there's a huge number. As I told you in the beginning as well, ours is a populous state. So everything cannot be good at one go. It's taking time, but 15% of 2 lakh itself is a huge number, and it's going to take some time.
Mr. Bishamali, why do you think that in terms of quantity, UP might be having more educational institutions, but in terms of quality, what Madan Mohan Malviya did is not being done today? Why?
First, the topic you were discussing earlier, the number of females in the education, I like to just give you a small information about medical education. Like I know many private medical colleges, including mine, where the number of female candidates are around 65% from last 10 years, I am saying, and only 35% are males.
So more women compared to men.
Admissions in medical colleges and nursing colleges, even in paramedical colleges also around 50-50. So that is a good news. At least parents are coming out and teaching their girl child. And regarding quality of education, see, again I come back to the point. What I think Mr. Gupta was pointing out, we don't have proper teachers. See, for everything you need to have a balance sheet which have sufficient money to pay to all these people and to run a institution at least at break-even. So see, nobody talks about economics of any project. See, if you go to Yale and Harvard and all these people, they have billions of dollars in their funds from the government, from their alumni, and so many other industries is sponsoring them. See, the main point is that to produce a good engineer, to produce a good doctor, or any other nursing or you have to have an infrastructure, and that takes lots of funds, lots of money. And that is, I feel, is lacking. Somewhere incentives have to be given. I think that now, the past, what I was hearing earlier, that because of the stability of the political system, I think that is now improving. At least now, for 5 years, we know from 2 terms that this government is there. So I think now the things are improving at the level of government also. I think we have seen in the last 10 years, or rather this 5 years, I think we have seen lots of changes. We have suggested many things, and many things are being implemented. But things, as he has been saying, Mr. Agarwal, that takes time. See, to create a Harvard and Yale, it takes 50 years and 60 years or maybe 100 years. So it takes time. We are at a very nascent stage, maybe 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. I think in next 10 years' time, I think you'll have more and more world-class institutions here.
Yeah, sir, you had a question right there. Please identify yourself and ask, who are you asking the question to?
My name is Anis Ansari. I'm a retired IS officer. I wish to draw the attention of not only the panelists, but those who are organizing the program, to shift the focus from very small mechanism level to the basic issue that you started with. Why is it that certain parts of Uttar Pradesh, they are backward, they are less developed than the other parts? Why is Eastern UP and Bundelkhand, they're not doing as well, or they have not done as well as Western UP? I wish to enlarge this debate. Why is it that India has not progressed as much, even compared to its own history in the right up to 19th century? Why we have gone down? Why is it other countries, they have done better? There's a very interesting study, very hard work brought out by two authors, Why Nations Fail. It's 2012 book. They have summed up that the societies which have inclusive political institutions and consequently inclusive economic institutions, they are the ones who have progressed all through the history, starting from Roman Empire. They have covered 30 countries, more than 30 countries. So the lesson of that book is, or that study is, that if you want any society to progress economically, you must focus on why is it that political institutions are not inclusive. If you have extractive and exploitative political institutions, they will further lead to creation of economic exploitative institutions. Why Eastern UP has not progressed is that the traditions of feudalism, they were and they are still very strong in Eastern UP compared to the Western UP. Similar is the case of Bundelkhand. Let me, you have the patience for 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Let me just cite.
Actually, the major focus of our study was on this inequality between Eastern and Western UP. Because of paucity of time, we had to rush, so we couldn't elaborate. But you go ahead.
If you allow me only 2 minutes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Because these are revealing data which many people may not have had the opportunity to go through. There is a Government of India study, Labour Ministry, right. 2001. It sums up that 15% population consisting of Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishya, the upper caste, occupy 60.6%, 66.5% of political representation in the country as a whole, 43% of educational institutions, 87% of employment, 97% of business, and 94% of landed estate. The situation is not materially different either among Muslim community, Sikhs, Christians, or other social groups. So the root of the problem for India's laggardness and the root of problem for certain regions in the country happens to be in the exploitative and less inclusive political institutions and consequently less inclusive economic institutions. I suggest that the debate that you are carrying on today,
sure,
it must focus on such a vital issue. Why is it that certain parts of UP or certain communities in UP, they are still lacking? Thank you.
So we have actually half a dozen panels coming up, which will certainly raise that question again and again. In fact, we have another panel on education. I'll give Professor Arvind Mohan not more than 1 minute to try and answer that question. And in the meanwhile, if there is a question from any of the students at the back, because education sort of concerns you directly, we would be very delighted. Professor Arvind Mohan, please try and answer that question.
I think Mr. Ansari, like always, has raised a very important issue. Uttar Pradesh is truly changing. And the biggest change which is happening is Lucknow-Agra Expressway. The travel time, it brings down to around 5.5 hours from Lucknow to Delhi. Now, why it is so important? India loses around 1 lakh crore worth of agri-produce annually. This is lost because we don't have logistics lines, we don't have warehouses, we don't have cold chain, etc. And of that, around 30,000 crore is apparently being lost in Uttar Pradesh. out of that 1 lakh crore. Now that 30,000 crore which is being lost is because of lack of connectivity. So once this connectivity happens, and we are expecting that large and significant logistics lines will come up, this 30,000 crore will be plugged. It will immediately mean a huge growth injection if this 30,000 crore is not lost. And who's losing it? It is the poorest of the poor. The chances are that this will be the finest anti-poverty intervention. And since 2008, India has been in grip of inflation, which is primarily agri-led inflation. Again, this will be the finest intervention, 1. 2, already this Eastern Expressway from Lucknow to Balia is in progress. Once this comes up, this connectivity to the hinterland will be phenomenal. It will transform Uttar Pradesh on the agricultural front. That is part 1. Part 2, we are doing a study again for an international agency, and we found that in India, Tamil Nadu is the most industrially efficient in terms of production and diversification of industrial range. Second is Uttar Pradesh. And why Uttar Pradesh? The most important reason why Uttar Pradesh comes after Tamil Nadu, ahead of all states in India, is Noida. And if you take out Noida from Uttar Pradesh, it even beats Tamil Nadu. Now, the efficient industry which exists in Noida and the diversification that you are observing in Noida didn't travel to central UP, didn't travel to eastern UP. It remained confined between Noida to Agra because of the connectivity, power and connectivity.
Professor Arvind, we'll have another session on education.
Just
to wrap up,
just half a minute. So once this connectivity happens, you can expect that that industrial efficiency and diversification which exists in Noida will begin to travel towards central UP and maybe towards eastern UP. So the world is changing. And as I said earlier, it is UP's opportunity, UP's time has come.
Sorry, we don't have time for any more questions, although I see a couple of hands here. We'll have another session on education. You can ask your questions right then. I'll be moderating that session early afternoon. But let me just point out 2 things that our findings tell us as a conclusion in terms of the question that Arvind Mohan was raising, or the last question that was raised. Why is East UP penurious? Why is East UP poor? Why is West UP rich? Why is Bundelkhand and Awadh much behind West UP? And our own findings show it was actually agriculture. In agriculture, the Green Revolution was a success in the wheat sort of, sowing areas, not so much in the rice areas. And as a result, Western UP, which is predominantly wheat and sugarcane belt, there the Green Revolution had a sort of great success, like in Haryana, in Punjab. So that was one. And number 2, industrially, why is East UP so sort of relatively, again, economically backward, West UP much more advanced? One, as was pointed out by Professor Arvind Mohan, proximity to Delhi. So in a way, Ghaziabad, or for example, Gautam Buddha Nagar, which is Noida, is a spillover of Delhi's industrialization. But what is most interesting about the development of UP, and which we'll carry on in the next few panels that we'll have, we'll come back to it again and again, is why Uttar Pradesh has grown so tremendously in services, but not so much in agriculture and industry. With these words, thank you very much, and we'll go for the next panel. Thank you very much to all the panelists, Professor Agrawal, Jisanalaji, and Arvind. Thank you very much.